They crossed continents to fight a war that was never theirs. They were promised freedom, yet many returned to the very chains they sought to break. Over 1 million African soldiers fought for the Allied powers in World War II, a staggering contribution of manpower, courage, and sacrifice. And yet, for decades, history largely erased their names, their battles, and their vital role in securing victory. This is their story. This is the story of the Forgotten Army. Welcome to Silent Warrior Studios. As the fires of war consumed Europe, the colonial powers of Britain and France turned their gaze to their vast African territories, from the bustling cities of Nigeria to the remote villages of Senegal, from the highlands of Kenya to the dense forests of the Congo. A call to arms went out. Young men, full of life and promise, were conscripted and recruited into foreign armies. The message was simple, powerful, and deeply ironic. They were being asked to fight for a freedom they themselves did not possess. Some were drawn by a sense of adventure or a genuine belief in the Allied cause against tyranny. They saw it as a global struggle for justice. For many others, however, there was no real choice. It was either enlist or face the consequences imposed by colonial administrators. They left their homes, their families, and everything they had ever known, carrying little more than the clothes on their backs. A heart full of courage and the fragile hope that their service would earn them not just honor, but a future unshackled from colonial rule. Thousands upon thousands boarded crowded ships, marching under foreign flags, their individual hopes merging into a collective dream for a better, freer Africa. They were heading into the unknown, a world away from home, to fight in a conflict that would redefine the world, and ultimately, their own destiny. Their journey took them to the most brutal and unforgiving battlefronts of the Second World War. They weren't just support troops. They were frontline soldiers fighting and dying in the sweltering jungles of Burma, on the treacherous mountain slopes of Italy, and across the sun-scorched deserts of North Africa. Their bravery was undeniable, matching that of any soldier from any nation on earth. Regiments like the King's African Rifles, the Tirailleurs, Senegalese, and the soldiers of the Free French Forces distinguished themselves time and again, holding the line where others had faltered and pushing forward against impossible odds. Consider the legendary Battle of Keren in Eritrea. It was there that Ethiopian and Eritrean troops, fighting alongside Allied forces, performed one of the most remarkable feats of the war. They scaled impossibly steep, heavily fortified cliffs under a relentless hail of enemy fire, achieving a victory that military strategists had deemed impossible. Their tactical brilliance and sheer determination turned the tide of the East African campaign. In the dense, disease-ridden jungles of Burma, West African soldiers from the 81st and 82nd Divisions became masters of jungle warfare, proving instrumental in pushing back the Japanese. They endured horrific conditions, fighting not just a determined enemy, but also malaria, dysentery, and the jungle itself. These were not just forgotten soldiers. They were heroes whose valor was written in blood and sacrifice on battlefields across the globe. While their individual names were often lost to history, their collective impact was monumental. Finally, the war ended. Victory was declared, and the world celebrated. The surviving African soldiers, decorated and battle-hardened, began the long journey home. They returned expecting a hero's welcome, expecting the honor and respect they had so dearly earned. They expected the promises of a new, more equal partnership to be fulfilled. Instead, what most of them found was a bitter and crushing reality. They were met not with parades, but with the same old poverty and systemic discrimination they had left behind. The empires they had fought and bled to defend quickly forgot their sacrifice. Many veterans were never paid the pensions they were promised. Their medals meant little in a society that still viewed them as second-class citizens. The skills and leadership they had learned on the battlefield were seen not as assets, but as potential threats to colonial authority. When some dared to demand justice, to ask for the fair pay and rights they were owed, the response was often brutal. In one infamous incident, French officers opened fire on West African veterans at the Thyroid camp in Senegal, killing dozens who were simply protesting for their back pay. But oppression often births defiance. The profound injustice these veterans faced lit a fire within them. Their struggle, their disillusionment, and their refusal to be silenced became the spark that would ignite the great independence movements across the continent. The very men who fought for Europe as freedom returned home to become the vanguard of Africa as liberation. Their story is rarely taught in school books. Their faces are missing from the great cinematic epics about World War II. But their legacy is not silent. It lives on in the courage of their descendants. It echoes in the anthems of free nations. It is woven into the fabric of every independence flag that flies proudly over Africa today. They were the forgotten army, the invisible warriors whose sacrifice helped shape the modern world. They were forgotten until now. Thank you for joining us on this journey to uncover the history that was left behind. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing it.